Alright, this building is actually a guard house. And I have not been able to find any specific relation of this building to the events as they played out in 1857. It could have been there before 1857 as well. There's no conclusive evidence about it. And the way you see it, it's naturally obviously built by the British. It's not a pre-British building. But it could be pre-1857 as well, simply because the British are here in Delhi in the first half of 19th century as well, and they're doing a lot of construction work. So like I said, an older cantonment was here where the Delhi University area is today, and there are many buildings around here in the old city as well as outside it which predate 1857. This could be one of those. Before we go to Puni Jheel, let me give you an idea about the relative positions of the rebels and the British and how they are placed on the ridge. Now the rebellion starts in the month of May of 1857, and they occupy, the rebels take over the city of Shahjahanabad and drive out everybody who is an enemy from there. Now all these people, the British mainly, flee the city, and that's when they move towards the ridge, go off to the Flagstaff and then further north beyond Delhi. So at this point of time, the ridge, the Delhi city and the ridge is occupied by the rebels. This is the month of May, and it takes a while for the British forces to actually, you could say, get their act together and get in reinforcements, enough reinforcements to actually try and make an attempt to regain the city. Because you can't do without Delhi. You lose Delhi, you lose the empire. Yeah? So it's very, very crucial to regain the city of Delhi. And this begins sometime in the first week of June. There are a series of small battles. One is at Ghaziabad, what is modern day UP. Another is at a place called Badli Ki Sarai, which is close to Azadpur, further north from here. So small battles between the British reinforced forces and the rebels on the other hand. And gradually, by the beginning of June, they are able to push back the rebels into the city. So in the month of June, the situation is that the ridge, which is a higher ground than the city, is occupied by British, and the city down south at a lower ground is where the rebels are. And there is, you could say, a middle region, which is something like the fighting zone. What is today the road between Kashmiri Gate bus terminus and the Peace Hazari courts, or the area also known as Sabzi Mandi. So that is, you could say, the middle ground where the rebels come out of the city, the British get down from the ridge, do their bit of fighting and go back to their respective positions. And this relative position of the British being on the ridge and the rebels being in the city goes on till the month of September of 1857. And this period between June and September has been referred to as the Siege of Delhi. Even though Delhi is effectively never besieged, they're never surrounded. Even the rebels are in, that's true, it's a walled-in city, that's also true. But the south and the east is open to them. And for the British, the north and the west is open to them. So it's actually the middle ground, which I mentioned as the road today, where most fighting is taking place. So people are coming out of their respective positions, do their fighting and go back. So this happens during this period, what is known as the Siege of Delhi, and it's actually the period of most bitter and most tough fighting ever recorded, you could say, in 1857. Firstly, it's the month of summer. It's not a pleasant time for anyone in Delhi. Yeah? So you can imagine, your people of course are dying from the wounds inflicted during war and battle, but also from disease and heat. It naturally makes things tougher. So there are lots of accounts of how people suffered during this period, and considered the most bitter period, most harsh period of the fighting in Delhi. I say it ended in September because September is the time when the British finally managed to break through the city gates. It's a walled-in city, and the British finally managed to barge in. It still takes them time to actually get into the Red Fort, the Jama Masjid. It's not an instant one-day affair that they break down the gate and get inside the city. It still takes them time. So that just tells us how tough it was. I think what was the extent, how fierce the fighting was, that it was an hour by hour matter. You couldn't just break in and walk into the city. They had to fight for each inch.
And this gate was Kashmiri Gate?
Kashmiri Gate, yes, also Lahori Gate. But Kashmiri Gate is a major breach. That's its significance in 1857. And Lahori Gate was also the place where simultaneously they were trying to get in. Both Kashmiri Gate and Lahori Gates are entrances to the city. There are several gates to the city. These are two of them, and these being closest to where we are from, suppose this is the position where we are attacking from down south, these will be the first places where you attack from. So Kashmiri Gate was the first to be breached then.
This is the time when there are soldiers, the one in the military and the one from the British side, both are fighting. What happens to the what happens to the people who were living? Did they all flee at that time?
No, some of them did, but apparently many of them suffered at the hands of the rebels also. So if I quote, not quote, but if I use Dalrymple's works, who has written, he's the most recent writer to write about, in English, to write about 1857 and apparently from a people's perspective. So he says, he does mention that the people who were in the city, the residents and all classes, they in fact did suffer quite a lot from what happened, from the chaos that's happening, because the rebels, they're actually without resources. Nobody's funding them really. The Mughal army is hardly there. Mughal treasury is also hardly existent. So they have to actually make do with a lot of looting from wherever they are. So many people in Delhi ended up being looted. Many people joined the rebels, became part of the rebellion against the British. Many people turned informers as well. Yeah, so they were in the city, but they worked for the British, giving them information and telling them of rebel movements. So it's a mixed bag, I would say. Yeah. So people did suffer like they would in any war, any battle, and a lot of suffering did not stop with the ending of the rebellion. It actually went on after 1857 as well, simply because many groups were targeted. Yeah, so you could say that I'm the winner now. I won the rebellion. I managed to crush the rebellion. Now I identify who are the culprits, who are the rogue characters, and then I hound them. Yeah, and another class of people who actually faced a decline after 1857 is the upper classes, those who were associated with the court.
Right.
Yeah.
The Chandni Chowk, people who lived in that Chandni
Yes,
Chowk.
yes. So earlier the gentry, the people who were patrons of art, culture, all the nice stuff we read about for Mughal art and culture, they were associated with the court. Now the Mughal court is gone and dead, so obviously these people suffer a decline. And their institutions, their houses don't exist in Chandni Chowk anymore, don't exist in Old Delhi anymore. Instead, there is a new class of Indians. They are Indian merchants, Indian bankers, who become important during this period. Yeah. They are, you could say, the nouveau riche in the city. So they acquire property, they acquire a lot of money, they are slightly friendly with the British, yeah. And they become the new upper classes in the city. And it's actually their institutions, their houses, which we today see as the old city. So you don't really see a lot of Mughal houses or Mughal institutions in the city, mostly 1857 and beyond, yeah. So that's the kind of change many people saw. So their fortunes declined and so on. And that's what all these poets have been lamenting about. There's a huge, cache of poetry about, and Urdu poetry, which is the lament for the city. It's stories and compositions about the decline of the city in 1857 and beyond, and post 1857. So they're crying about the glory of the city and how such fate which has befallen one of it. the Khuni Jheel.